Welcome back, folks. Episode 196 of Two Chaps, Many Cultures. And guess who suggested the topic of hair? It wasn't me. It's been a long time since I've dealt with this topic. So I am here to learn from a long memory ago. But seriously, folks, this is a great topic. Fascinating. This is wonderful. And I'm very excited. We've got a couple of guests today that are going to lead us through some great knowledge. And stick around. It's going to be fun. Yes, indeedy. Welcome back to Chaps Many Cultures, the #1 show on the internet about the business of culture and the culture of business. How are you today, pal? Looking very urban, I might say.
Brooklyn, you know, you got to know where you're coming from. No, that's not where I'm coming from. But hey, I have a beautiful hair day. Can you tell? This is the episode where we talk about hair, and it is a disaster. But maybe that's by design, because look at this. It's uncoiffed, or it is, what's the word? It's also getting salt and pepper here. It is a disaster. People just don't get old. Getting old is overrated. Don't do that. We're going to talk about hair today. And since this guy doesn't have much of it left, and mine is not worth mentioning right now, we thought we talk about hair that's a lot more exciting than ours. And I have to be honest. The reason why we made this topic, we call it the culture of hair, and I was pushing to call it something with black hair, and Brett said, come on, let's massage this a little. Let's not rub it into people's faces. So here I am talking about rubbing it into your face, because I live in a culture, and so does Brett, and some of you probably in the audience also live in a culture where black hair is not the hair that the majority of the people in your society have. And yet somehow there seems to be an expectation, a societal expectation of how hair has to be, what is proper form, what is a right hairdo, what is a wrong hairdo. And for some reason, these rules, whether they are really written out and agreed upon by everybody, or whether they're just made up and happen to be all of a sudden, these rules or these expectations, societal norms, seem to be defined by people who look like Brett and I. So what gave white folks the power or the justification or the right to regulate the way black hair has to be? And I've seen a few episodes over the years where especially people who don't have power of their own because they're minors or they're students or they're in some kind of a work or educational relationship dynamic where they cannot challenge the powers, where they're forced to do something about their hair in order to participate, in order to go to work, or in order to play a sport, or in order to qualify for a competition, or whatever the gateway is they need to go through. And somehow hair in those instances became a qualifier or disqualifier. And I've been asking myself, what if that happened to me? I mean, look at me, I look like horrible. So, but I'm not black, so I'm not the person to talk about this. Are you, Brett?
Not really.
So what do we do about that?
Let's get some real people with some real knowledge and some great wisdom. That is what we always do on this show.
Well, then I would introduce one guest and you introduce the other guest, because we have two of them. How's that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
well,
you go ahead. I'm gonna let you bring up our first guest.
Melissa Fredericks, #1. Welcome, Melissa. How are you?
Hey, Melissa.
I'm excellent. How are you guys doing?
Well, we are splendid. We're trying to keep up. And there is Yannick Chavois. or
No,
Javois.
no.
I never know how to say your name right, Yannick. Hey, welcome.
3 years later, and you still don't know how to say my name?
No, I'm still learning it. I'm still learning it.
It's,
So we brought these two wonderful ladies to the program today because not only does it seem like black hair can be a qualifier or disqualifier in a mainstream white society, it also seems that it's black women who bear the biggest burden of bringing their whole head of hair to work or to wherever they take it. Wouldn't that be the case? Would you agree, Yannick, Melissa, that this is something that affects black women more so than black men?
absolutely.
Yeah, even if you just kind of look at the black hair care industry, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And if you talk to black women the world over, our hair is really, really important to us. And women in general, right? So women have a thing about hair. Black women especially have a thing about hair.
I was told once by a black female friend of mine that she gives me credit for being a white dude who's trying to understand, but she told me explicitly, stop asking about the hair. So now here I am asking about the hair. So what is it that makes black hair different than white hair? And I mean, I could have done the research, so I'm asking you, I'm putting again the burden on you to explain it to us, but would you be willing to shed a little bit of light that we white folks don't understand?
I think it's a form of expression. Being able to style your hair a certain way based on your outfit or based on, you know, the event that you're attending, and just be free and express yourself in that way. I myself consider it art. But you know, that's where it's different. I don't know that very many white people view hair that way, or have the ability to do things with their hair the way that we do. And so that's the difference for me. It's just being able to style it and do whatever I want with it, and be myself.
Now, I understand both of you worked or did formally work in a corporate American context. And both of you are from the US, however, not from the mainland. So tell our audience in real quick terms, Melissa and Nick, you're American, but not from the mainland. How's that? Nick, why don't you go first?
You want to go ahead, Melissa?
Sure. I was going to say we're quasi-American. We get some of the privileges and benefits of being American, but only when we actually are living in America. So we're both from the United States Virgin Islands. And I'm from St. Thomas. Yannick is from St. Croix. And so it's really interesting to grow up learning all about America, and yet Americans know very little about the territories that they possess, that they own. So I just remember like going to the States and having a pretty good grasp about American history and culture, and them not having any understanding or concept about us. And us, we are Americans. So it's an interesting dichotomy, because we see America for all of its wonder and greatness and splendor, and then we're also really able to disassociate ourselves because we're not part of the contiguous 50 states.
Mm. Now, when both of you worked in corporate America, how did hair become an issue, or did it become an issue? Was it ever something that you had to justify, explain, or talk about?
I don't think I've ever had to talk about it, but it's something that when I've interviewed for corporate jobs, I've had in the back of my mind, you know, going in as an African American woman with dreadlocks. Automatically there's two strikes against me walking in the door. And so I've always felt like I've had to work that much harder and present myself in such a way that I stack up, you know, with the competition.
So strike one is being a woman or being African American? What was strike one?
Being a woman, for sure.
And strike two was the hair?
African American.
African American. So strike
Strike
3 was
thing.
the dreadlocks.
Yeah, strike three.
So, but you were not out, you were in, despite the 3 strikes. Good for you. So,
So,
now,
and for me,
yeah, go
I was
ahead.
gonna say unique. Like I used to have locks. I think there's a Facebook a post that I just put up. I used to have locks. They were like shoulder length when I was in St. Thomas, and when I came to America, I made a conscientious decision to cut them off because I thought to myself, I'm in America now. I have to get a professional job, and so they're not going to hire me if I look a certain way. So I think the greatest trick, or the greatest trick about oppressing people or creating these unrealistic beauty standards by which, and it doesn't not just affect Black people, it affects people all over. Like it impacts white people with curly hair, it impacts Asian people, it impacts all of us. But when the oppressor no longer has to has the work of like mandating the thing, right? Like I no longer have to regulate beauty standards because I've gotten the people to do it themselves.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right. Like if I can get you to do what I want you to do, without me having to tell you, like that's the greatest game ever.
Yep.
So, how did that feel when you made that decision on your own to cut your hair because you felt that you needed to meet a certain corporate expectation? Did you feel? How do you feel about that?
I mean, I will tell you, I cut my hair for multiple reasons besides my feeling that I needed to look professional.
Mm-hmm.
Or even like who gets to decide what professional looks like.
Exactly.
Right? So it wasn't something that I was like pained about, but it is things that you think about. Like I think the just kind of the mental magic or like the mental exercises that you have to go through simply to be considered acceptable is part of the exhaustion of what it means to be Black in America.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just a lot. It's a lot to think about. Right. I was telling somebody the other day, I was like, you know, when I go exercising outside, there's a couple things I got to think about. Like I got to think about the fact that I'm a woman, so I'm trying to like dress appropriately, so it doesn't give somebody an excuse to like snatch you up. There's no real excuses for snatching people up, but it is. Right. And then I also have to think about the fact that I'm Black, and so sometimes I don't want to get dressed up in really cute gym workout clothes. I sometimes want to wear a hoodie. But now, does that make me a target? You know, like, am I going to be more likely for people to pick me up from off of the street in a different way? So it's just like the mental exercises that you have to go through, the things that you have to think about. Because I'm sure, like, Christian, when was the last time you went outside to work outside and went to yourself like, oh, I have to dress appropriately or else someone's going to snatch you?
Never.
Yeah.
0 times. Mm-hmm.
So it's just a lot of work.
Yeah.
I kind of said, okay, I'm gonna give up my my ignorance here, because this is something that I actually said before we went live here. I was explaining to these wonderful ladies, I hope I haven't made mistakes in the past, but I'm just listening to this and I'm going, you know what, I have. Because I think that if I see a young lady, for example, behind a coffee counter with hair that she has obviously taken a lot of time, or somebody's taken a lot of time to braid and model into that, and I've actually said to them, oh, what one? I mean, it looks like a piece of art to me. It is an expression, but then again, am I actually causing more stress, I guess, because my intent is certainly not that, but we also talk about in this show the difference between intent and impact. Mm-hmm. Is the impact, now that I'm pointing it out, just another reason for that person to go, okay, well, now you see me as different because of my hair, where I could just go about my business and appreciate it quietly without having to point it out? although my intent is to truly appreciate the care and that this person takes. So I would love to know if what would be appropriate, because obviously doing what I do, I'm always aware of what effect I have on other people if I can possibly do it in a positive way.
I don't think there's any harm in that. I think that women in general love to be complimented on their hair and how they look. So there's no harm in pointing out how beautiful a person's hair looks. And if your intent is good, you know, you can go along your day feeling like you did the right thing. I'm never offended until someone wants to touch my hair. That's when I'm like, I don't understand why people need to do that. And it happens a lot.
I don't like that either. You know, I mean, well, what is it? What compels people to touch other people's head, not just the hair, anything in the head? I mean, do you do that with your pets? I mean, you do that to a strange dog, they'll bite your hand off. So I don't know why people would think that's an appropriate approach.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. It happens often, and sometimes it's very intrusive because they don't ask. They just go in and they grab your hair, and it's like, oh, this is so beautiful. And it's like, well, is it your real hair? And how did it get that way? And sometimes I want to assume that their intention is good. But sometimes it's just like, I don't know. I feel like a caged animal in a zoo that you came by to see, you know? So it's tough sometimes in that aspect, but I don't mind compliments on my hair because I do, you know, weird stuff with my hair sometimes.
Now, Yannick, I know you played sports in college. So you were a basketball player, and that was part of what made your 20s exciting, I would argue. Was there ever a time when coaching staff or teammates said, "Hey, you have to rein in the hair"? Was there ever limitation or restrictions put on you?
No, not within my team. I think that with opponents sometimes, based on my stature, and I'm a Black woman and I have dreadlocks, it was always assumed that I was aggressive. That was always an assumption, and I'm quite the opposite if you know me. But yeah, that's the thing. And also in corporate America, that's the thing. You're a woman with dreadlocks. You're Black. It's assumed that you're going to be the angry Black woman or the aggressive Black woman at some point in your tenure.
Mm-hmm. So there's an expectation of behavior attached to appearance.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think it stems from, you know, like the 1970s Black Power movement, where Black people were exploring hairstyles that were not within the stream of like the cultural norm of what beauty it was, right?
Yeah, but who said that? Who defined that norm?
White culture did. And this is like what is interesting, right? Is before we I've never told you this, Christian, but I my thesis in college, my bachelor's thesis was about Black beauty in white culture, and then I've also written I wrote a play about Black hair. So I was like, oh, this is my wheelhouse. Thank you for asking. But during the Enlightenment, and to justify slavery, to justify the enslavement of people, right, for a Christian culture, what had to be done was equating whiteness with purity, everything that was good, and dark skin with everything that was bad. Because then I can justify enslaving people. Right? Because you're bad and you're not really people. And so if I'm putting a particular phenotype as preferable and another phenotype as inferior, part of the system of control, because that's really what it is. I mean, like, it's a divide and conquer mentality. It works really, really well. And it's not like it didn't originate with white people. It's not like, well, oh, it's always white people's fault. Like every culture has it. You look at India, there's a caste system. Within Black culture, there's also a caste system. Like every culture has a way to rank power and keep the powerful powerful and keep the oppressed oppressed. Like this is not new. And it's not culturally specific. It's people. And so in order to say like this is perfection, then everything that doesn't look like this is imperfection. It's inferior. And so we continue to get it. Like we it's morphed and it's shaped over time, but we continue to see what's beautiful. Because I remember when I was growing up, thin lips were really beautiful, right? Like women who had thin lips were the thing. And now women who have thick lips are the thing, but not necessarily Black women with thick lips. Right. I remember when like long blonde hair was a thing. And so long blonde hair is still a thing. That's why actors and actresses get hair extensions. Right. So it impacts everybody. There's like no one who this doesn't impact. But it's clearly something that we do in order to continue to keep certain people in power and other people trying to pursue an image of what power is. And we do it through the fashion industry and we do it through the beauty industry. Like all of these things are telling us what beauty really looks like, instead of just being comfortable with who you are. Like who says you're not beautiful? Like exactly the way you are.
So, I want to honor our audience who's already commenting. Laura, thank you. Patricia, thank you as well. We'll bring up your comments and questions in a second. I want to go back a little bit to the origins of this black and white labeling and this power dynamic and system of oppression. So some might say that black hair is an art form, which to a certain degree is certainly the case. It's also connected to a skill that one needs to have in order to create these artful hairdos. But that's not the entire story, right? I mean, black hair has a different structure than Caucasian hair or Asian hair. So there is a different type of hair follicle that reacts differently to water and shampoo or other beauty products. So part of the way that black hair is and needs to be taken care of is owed to its chemical and biological structure, correct? Mm-hmm. So when slaves were brought to the New World, one of the acts that the oppressors did in order to subjugate their slaves was to shave their heads off and get rid of that either tribal belonging that the hair expressed or any other type of expression connected to the hair that was eliminated in order to exert control, right? So and you correct me if I'm misremembering this, but during the African American liberation movement, throughout the civil rights movement and beyond, rediscovering black hair in all its beauty and all its facets became also not a form of taking care of your body hygiene. It also became politicized and a form of social justice expression. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah.
So when a majority white society then overtly or covertly puts up rules that prevent access or that grant access based on, among many things, hairstyles, what can we do now? I mean, we're in 2021. We're in the year after George Floyd's murder. We're in the year of the woke Olympics. We're in the year of, I would argue to a certain degree, an awakening moment where many predominantly white societies are starting to come to terms with their racist past and exploring avenues to do it better. So what is it we can do? What type of frameworks do we need to develop to make sure that African Americans, especially women, black women in the workplace or in sports or in any other field of their lives, are being at a disadvantage? Any ideas? Any thoughts about that?
That's a tough question. I think it starts with creating an awareness, right? And holding people accountable. I think there are some people that I worked with in corporate America, some white women who reached out after the George Floyd incident, and it's like, well, what can we do? And I said, refuse to be silent, right? You guys are aware of the injustices, but because it doesn't directly affect you, you choose to not speak up. And in order for us to see any type of change, collectively, we have to band together to make sure that corporations know, like, this is what we're standing for. Going forward, things need to change. Even now, as I'm entertaining some companies in corporate America for sport a little bit, I'm asking the question, in light of everything that's happening in the world, as far as the George Floyd situations and all the other African Americans who have been killed at the hands of police officers, what are you doing as a corporation to make sure that the people who work for you are saying and doing the right things, right? Because it's not just good enough to make a public statement to check a box anymore. I want to know that you're doing something to make sure that things change going forward. So it's definitely, I'd say, putting your foot on the gas and saying, this is what we're saying going forward. And if you can't get with that, then I don't want to be a part of your organization. I don't want to be a part of whatever it is that you stand for. It's making a choice and saying, a paycheck isn't good enough, right? We're all people at the end of the day who want to be treated fairly. Skin color and hair and all those things should not matter.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think being able to be willing to foster these kind of conversations. So I'm privileged enough to be a part of working with diversity, equity, and inclusion conversations and training right now in my space. And what it's allowed for us to do is to have really deep conversations like this conversation that we're having right now, in a restorative way. So I'm all about having these conversations, but I also want to make sure that we're doing it in a safe space where people don't feel like re-traumatized or victimized, or it's like I'm blaming you. And sometimes we have to be comfortable with being a little uncomfortable. But if we don't have the conversations, if we don't talk to each other, if we continue to work in silos, then we're never going to really see any change. So if you do have, if your social network looks homogenous, make an active effort to find ways to incorporate or network with people who don't look like you, and be curious. I think there's a difference between tokenism and really just being curious about people. And one comes from, okay, I did the thing, right? Like I got the Black friend or the Asian friend or the Latino friend, right? And the other is I genuinely am interested in who you are as a person, and I want to get to know you. Because the reality of it is no group of people are a monolith, right? Unique and I, while we come from similar backgrounds, we're not the same person. I can't talk for Unique. Unique cannot talk for me. And so we just have to be willing to be uncomfortable and check ourselves, check our privilege. And everybody has privilege. It's not something that's solely gifted to white people. I come from a very privileged background. And so as a Black woman who grew up in a place that didn't experience systematic racism, we just don't have systematic racism in the Caribbean, in the Virgin Islands, to the extent of which we have it in America.
Right.
We have it, but not the same way. So I come from a place of privilege, but I have to oftentimes check my privilege because I don't have the same Black experience as someone who was born in Mississippi or Miami or New York or California. I don't have the same experience. So there are things that I've had to check myself on as well. So I got to check my privilege all the time.
That's good insight. Thank you for that, Melissa. And if we're already addressing some of the questions, or the question that Laura is asking, so I want to bring this up real quick. So she's saying thank you to both of you. And she says the exhaustion you described to be quote unquote appropriate is something most white people don't think about. And Laura herself works with many white people who tell her that they want to reach out to build interracial relationships, but worry about doing or saying the wrong thing. So instead of taking action to make a connection, they don't do anything. So how do we get out of this vicious cycle of for fear of making a mistake, we don't do anything? What is an appropriate way to, as we're talking about hair, what would be an appropriate way for somebody non-Black to broach that topic?
I think it's all about the intention, right? And you can say that early on. You go into the conversation saying, hey, my intention in this conversation is to understand, right? Because I feel like I'm ignorant on the topic. And if you approach it that way, then nothing that you say should be taken offensively. And it's an opportunity for that person to be educated on the proper way to approach those conversations.
Okay.
And then it also comes to like, get to know somebody. Don't just talk about, let me touch your hair. Like, have a relationship with people. I think that the power of relationship is underestimated. The reality, we all make mistakes. All of us make mistakes. I am, whoever is free from sin, cast the first stone. I have made plenty of mistakes. But if you have a relationship with someone, it makes a difference, right? Like, just cultivate a willingness to get to know other people, not because you want something, but just because you're curious about other people. And then once you've built a rapport, just say, hey, I'm really curious about A, B, and C. I don't want to offend you, but I want to know a little bit more. Can you help me?
Mm-hmm. Now, Melissa and Yannick, the two of you and I, we've had a relationship over years, and that's why I felt comfortable asking you to come onto the program to talk about this. When I first asked you this, I think I sent you a text message or an email. Do you remember what your first response was internally?
I think I was excited, honestly, because there aren't a lot of conversations around this topic, right? That I'm aware of, and so I thought it'd be a great chance for us to talk about hair and other topics, of course, within the conversation, because social injustice and all that would come up. So it's a great platform to discuss those things. So I was excited about it.
And I mean, I know you, I trust you. I've had conversations before, so I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's talk about hair. I'm excited.
And I'm asking you this, Melissa, specifically because it took you, I think, less than 30 seconds to respond to my message. Said, I'm in, let's do it. So thank you for being here and allowing us ignorant middle-aged white dudes to talk about stuff we have no idea. I want to acknowledge Patricia. I don't know, did you monitor what Patricia put in the chat, Brett? She's like, there's like 20 or 30 comments already. And just full disclosure for those of you who don't know, Melissa and Yannick, you might not know Patricia. Patricia herself is from the Caribbean. Patricia, remind us what island? St. Vincent, I think, but I might be wrong. I'm sure it'll pop up in the comments here soon. And Patricia's been on this program before.
Otherwise known as Miss Globalicious.
Yes. So Miss Globalicious says building relationships builds trust. Exactly. She also says Black people from outside the U.S. must connect with U.S.-born POC with roots to slavery. So many comments, too many to read. Oh, and she tags all of our fellow Black female friends in the industry. Love it. Black Power Day here. A lot of our great teachers. And I think I will go back, and we've said this many times in the previous 195 episodes of this little show that that I love, like you're saying, Melissa, that curiosity is just the core of what we do. If you come at it, and there's a lot of historical separation between the diversity and inclusion and equities work and intercultural work. And yet it's now kind of, unfortunately,
only now being recognized that both of those can't exist in a silo. And I'm obviously intrigued by how much easier it is to approach these topics through curiosity from an intercultural perspective. To say you're obviously different from me, we might speak different languages, we might look different, we pray differently, we're attracted to different people. But that's a cultural thing, you know. This is a thing that we are brought up with in our cultures, and of course, race and all that being a construct that we've invented anyway. You know, let's use that as an approach to say, this is why I'm curious about you, and what makes you tick as a person, and then we can form that basis of what we learn through the understanding and empathy for the experience of others, to then invite the conversation about diversity and inclusion. Because to both of your points, it is a very triggering conversation to have with oftentimes people that look like Christian and I, and we understand, you know, the visceral response that comes, but you know, we want to encourage people to reach out to wonderful ladies like this, because these are the people that are going to teach us, right? These are the people who are going to teach our children. We're not necessarily going to be the best to do it, but people like Kristen and I and others still have to learn and do the work ourselves. So I just wanted to say that as a point of gratitude to both of you and for what you've shared with us.
And I know both Melissa and Yannick know my youngest daughter, Anna, who for 2 years went to a school here in our Atlanta neighborhood where my daughter was the only white child in the entire school. So Anna learned a lot about Black hair in those 2 years. And whenever I make an uneducated comment about cornrows and weaves and extensions and locks and, I don't know, block braid or whatever terminology is out there, and she will verbally slap my fingers and Dad, just shut up, you have no idea what you're talking about. Just want to give credit to the young generations across all ethnicities who manage to educate each other a lot more efficiently than we as adults can. So when she was 13, 14, she learned all about this from her classmates and came home a smarter person, educated her ignorant family about this. So that's the kind of cross education that we need, I think. I also want to give credit. In research for today's episode, I found out, and I don't know how new this is, but it looks like it's only a week or so old, that the U.S. military relaxed their regulations about what type of hairdo are appropriate in service. Melissa, you're nodding your head. You read about it too? So do you know what the new guidelines are?
I don't know what the new guidelines are, but this is actually a very long-standing the battle for, and it's really hard. So I'll give you some frame of reference. Like my grandfather was in the Army. He retired from the Army. He taught JROTC. My father was in the Navy. My brother's in the Army, or he just retired from the Army. I have another brother who's in the Marines. I have a niece who was in the Navy Reserve. Like we have a lot of military people in our family. And so I think kind of because of that, I think we're a little bit more conservative in terms of hairstyles, simply because like we already, like that's, you go into the military, this is what comes with it. But in the reality of all things, at the end of the day, like our braid's gonna impair your ability to do the work.
Probably not.
I don't know. I mean, like when it comes down to everything, is like, does this really matter? Right? Can a person do their job, do it effectively and efficiently? And I understand having particular standards. Like everybody has to have a standard. But what are we basing our standards on?
Right. Yeah, when I graduated college, that was 2008, and I don't know if you remember those times, but there was a very dark times in the U.S. And so I I thought about going to the military. I actually sat with a recruiter and decided I'd go into the military as an officer. And he said, "Yeah, you're gonna have to cut your hair." I said, "Well, not happening. So I guess I won't be going to the military. I'll go with option C, because I wasn't going to cut my hair because I didn't see what my hair had to do with me joining the military, serving my country, and doing a good job." So needless to say, that didn't work out. But I'm glad that they're changing things so that people are allowed to be themselves and express themselves as they see fit, and still, represent their country well.
And that seems counterintuitive to me, because the military, we're actually in a position in this country, and maybe in every country, that it is harder to recruit people. And why not have people visually represented in, to look up to, right? And for young people to grow up and say, wow, I can actually express myself either through my hair, my fashion, whatever, because now we've got an open society that accepts that I can do the job. I can stand on a wall just as comfortably as anybody else and defend that, defend the whatever is the defense of, like, obviously the military does a lot more than just defending. It does a lot of service things, but that's really what is the point. We have a local police officer here who is a Sikh, and he wears a turban, and it just made complete sense to me, because we have such a large South Asian population here that he is driving around here in his police car, and young kids are looking at him. Why can't they look up and say, wow, you mean I can do that too? I can serve the community, I can be a part. To me, it sounds counterintuitive to make everybody look the same, but that's just maybe an Aussie thing.
And I will say, like, because I've never been in the military, so I don't know the rationale for why that's a necessity. And so I don't want to say like, oh, it doesn't have any meaning or purpose. I'm sure it does. I'm sure that the uniformity, like, I grew up with school uniforms. I understand the purpose of why you wear a uniform. Like, I understand that. I did it from K to 12. And so because I don't know what the ultimate outcome of the goal of that uniformity is, I don't want to like poo-poo it, because I'm sure that there's a reason. But I do agree with the fact that representation is important, and it allows us to imagine ourselves as things that we might not have ever imagined ourselves if we don't see it in somewhere else. So
now you said something, Melissa, that I think is at the core of my sentiment around this topic. How does hair and hairstyle impact or restrict the way I perform my task for which I am applying, or for which I'm qualified otherwise? Would it then be fair to say, or would it be, am I accusing blanketly too many people that if we all deep down really know that the hair doesn't really affect the performance, that by invoking any form of arbitrary hair rule, we're simply being dicks. We're simply being, we're simply perpetuating racist segregation or discrimination in other ways. Is it that easy? Can we equate it that if somebody is especially somebody in a position of authority who is white and is calling on a hair rule to restrict a person of color from participating, can we simply call that what it is, racism? Or am I painting with too broad of a brush? All right, that's the answer I was looking for.
I think I get from that answer that it's probably really good to ask them, because really, I mean, I couldn't see a situation where you actually pose that question to somebody in the military who puts that in there, and they can't in there. I mean, I agree with you, Melissa. I'm a curious mind. Maybe there is. I don't know. I'm just gonna, positive intent, but I'm thinking that. That'd be a tough question to answer in real terms. There'd probably be a political roundabout way that they'd loop around and make some kind of hash of it. But I just can't see how you'd answer it. So thank you for that. That was probably as profound an answer as you could possibly get. You know, I don't know. Well done.
No, so what's really interesting that about that question is, how do we get codes of professionalism? How did we make a decision as to what's appropriate for a particular profession, whether it's the medical profession, whether it's political profession, and what I thought about was that the people who came up with, let's say, the legal system, right? So lawyers, judges, these were people who came up with a system of laws. And then they said, okay, so in order for us to make this work, we have to train other people to do this particular type of work. Well, you're not going to train people who don't look like you, right? You're going to train people who look like you, like who come from the same background as you do, who had the same moral authority and compass that you had, right? Because it makes sense.
Are you talking about the British legal system where they wear these funny wigs? No, that's not the reference you're making. Right? Okay. Just curious. All right.
That's a great question. Like, where do they come up with these wigs? But someone created this standard, and so now the whole thing is like, let's replicate the standard. Let's do it again and again and again. So we pull from the same types of people who have the same types of backgrounds, who have and it's just a really myopic way to look at things. But again, we only do better when we know better. And I don't think that no one who's in power wants to share it with people who don't look like them, sound like them, believe the same things that they believe. So it's about continuing to perpetuate, power.
Right.
And I want to keep it in a specific demographic. Now, again, this has nothing to do with the color of your skin or the wave of your hair. This is just, like I told you, I come from an island where Black people are in charge. So it's just kind of a form of nepotism. It's a small-minded perspective. But if that's all you've been doing all your life, how would you know to do something different?
Thanks for that. Laura has another question about this. So she asks you, Melissa and Yannick, do either of you have close relationships with white people that you feel comfortable sharing about? How did these relationships start? And do you have examples of any don't do that behavior in addition to not touching here? What would be another thing that you would ask people to refrain from doing?
That was so cute.
I know, that was awesome.
Come again?
Do you have friends with white people? Yes.
Yes.
Many white friends.
Well, I have a handful. I consider Christian and his wife to be, friends of mine, and they're white. One of my best friends from high school. We've been friends since we were 16 years old. White girl, and our lockers were right next to each other. We were both starting at a new school, and we struck up a conversation, and we've been friends ever since. It was that simple. And then my two other friends that I met in corporate America, they're like family to me. I've had Thanksgiving dinners, Christmas. I'm around their kids, and it all started with just natural conversation. It wasn't like, hey, I like your hair today. It was just like, hey, you're cool. I like you. What's your name? And from there you just build a bond just like you would with anyone else. So it was never anything forced. It just happened organically, and those have been some beautiful friendships that hold near and dear to my heart.
And my daughter thinks you're cool because your sneakers have no crease.
I love her. Can I adopt her?
Not yet.
there's probably some days, we're fathers, there's certain days we've been fighting, just take her, for goodness sake. You can maybe do a better job.
No. What I love about, speaking of your daughter, what I love about her is that she's so open to different experiences and different people. She loves it. I think we went to an art exhibit for a Black artist, and she was so enamored with, you know, the style and the time and effort that went into the work. And at no point it was like, oh, he's a black guy. It was just like, he's a really great artist and I like his work and I want to purchase some of his stuff, right? It was never about color for her. I don't think she sees color at all, which is beautiful.
I think she sees it. She doesn't give it more thought than is necessary. I think that's the beauty and the innocence of being exposed to this at a young age rather than having to come to a realization at a later time in life. Now, one last question before I let you go, because there's been some celebrities who have been accused of, white celebrities that is, who have been accused of making their white hair look like black hair. Is that something that rubs you the wrong way? Is it okay if Justin Bieber has dreadlocks, or is that something where we're like, whatever?
It depends. So this is where we're like, we're not a monolith. So I'm going to say like my answer, and Unique is going to be like, no, Melissa, that's something totally, because we're different people. I think cultural appropriation is, it's a real thing. I think that it's really hard to have a conversation about cultural appropriation again as a monolithic thing, because different people have different relationships with different communities.
Okay.
And so what one particular celebrity does might be viewed differently because of that person's relationship with a particular type of community.
Got it.
Right. So I'll use myself as an example. So my uncle is from India, and I went to India like in 2018 to a wedding. Now, did I walk around with specifically Indian garb the entire time? No, because I ain't have any. But two, when it came time to the wedding, I put on a sari. I purchased a couple of them. But I don't necessarily walk around every day with a sari. Not because I don't feel like I'm not connected enough to that community, but just because I was like, I don't know if you've ever put a sari on, but it's heavy. It's not particularly, they're beautiful, but they're hot. I think if you're going to utilize someone else's culture in fashion, then I think you need to be prepared to be criticized. Mm-hmm. And I think that you need to, if you're going to do it, you probably want to throw out a disclaimer as to like why you made a particular decision. Now, culture is like, it's super fluid and it's great to experiment with. And you may have studied or you have relatives or da-da-da, but just be mindful of the fact that because you are not of that culture, it will be perceived in a specific, it may possibly be perceived in a specific way. So it depends on your relationship with the community that you've appropriated that culture from. Are you trying to make it like, this is my culture and I came up with it? Because that makes a difference. And then two, just be prepared to recognize that someone will say something. But as long as you're okay with it, that's all you.
So if I'm willing to handle the response I get, then I brought my own punishment upon me. All right.
Especially if you wear a sari, Christian.
Yeah, I mean, that's a beauty to behold, me in a sari. Yeah, Yannick, would you concur, or do you look at this a different way?
I agree wholeheartedly. I'm all for people doing, whatever they're comfortable doing, just knowing that there's some things that come with that. Justin Bieber got a lot of backlash for his dreadlocks not too long ago, but he's been a part of the urban community somewhat musically, and so I was just like, hey, the guy's doing whatever he wants to do, what feels good to him. But I think he knew that there was going to be some backlash, and he just didn't care. He just kind of went about his day the way he saw fit. But yeah, I think that as long as you know that there's going to be a conversation around it, and you should be prepared to maybe answer some questions about it, then it all works for me.
Okay, good. Thank you for clarifying that. So off to the barber it is, and let me get my dreadlocks in for the summer. All right, now.
Yeah,
I'm
just know that me and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I mean, I got to say, I'm in pretty good company.
Okay, all right. So you and The Rock. Okay, good. Like, glad we clarified that. Oh, this was lovely. Yannick, Melissa, thank you so much for enduring our ignorance and educating us and shedding some multifaceted light on this topic. Appreciate you being here. You all have a wonderful weekend. Brett, I know you got to run to your next training.
Yeah. Thank you, ladies. This is wonderful. Thank you for taking the time on this Friday. It is Two Chaps, Many Cultures Friday. It is Friday. And it's a long weekend. Have a wonderful long weekend here in the US anyway. I mean, maybe not everybody. So, yes, Patricia is saying, thank you, Patricia. See, somebody mentions my, I can't even bring the comment up, but anyway, thank you very much. Anybody, all the comments, wonderful. Thank you very much. And have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Two Chaps, Many Cultures. We will see you next episode. Stick around.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.